Hello, everyone. Welcome to Astrologer Climate Witness. I am returning to do the second portion of the Arctic Death Spiral article. Yes, it's been a while, and I promised a second part to finish reading this. Maybe some people have looked this up to read on their own. I'm really sorry my husband uh, did the invasion on the last one. I should have had the door shut, and I hadn't reminded him that I was going to be recording, so that was part of the problem. Um, I just, hey, I'm a real person. Things happen. I have stuff going on here, and yeah, I have somebody who's just very into sports, and like I'm not. Um, anyways, here we go. I'm going to start reading the rest of this article, and we'll take up some astrology after that. And this is rather impromptu. I had a very long day. I watched a Zoom class on Lyme disease and homeopathic medicine before this, but I decided it was a good time to go ahead and try to finish this up. So, when is the first ice-free Arctic expected? This is where it gets really tricky. Apparently, predicting when this will happen not only requires significant data modeling, but also a crystal ball. One study on this topic said if the world warms above 2 degrees C this century, note in parentheses, for warming above 2°C, frequent ice-free conditions could be expected potentially for several months per year, parentheses over. The Arctic will likely have a 3-month ice-free period each summer by 2050, but many argue this is much too conservative. 2041 was founded by polar explorer, environmental leader and public speaker Robert Swan, OBE. Swan is the first person in history to walk to both the North and South Poles as the date by which humanity will see devastating changes if we don't act now. It could be gone as early as 2035. And if we don't act now, yeah, okay, whatever. New observations also indicate that the Arctic could be ice-free during the summer by the 2030s, a date earlier than previously projected. It is important to note that much of the Arctic's sea ice cover is made up of thinner ice in past decades, making it vulnerable to abrupt change. However, 2040 is the date often provided in the credible research given in the last couple of years. Prior to this most recent stated 2100, but that number is now very out of date and out of step with data. That's significant. Other researchers are saying we certainly don't have even until 2040 or 2050. And the latest research says it's coming much earlier than previously predicted. For example, the U.S. Navy researchers predicted an ice-free Arctic by the summer of 2016. According to this report, we are already overdue for this event. Researchers recently had a breakthrough in finding the specific mechanism behind the rapid melt of sea ice in the Arctic Ocean. In quotes, Arctic sea ice could be gone in summer by next year, 2022, says Jennifer A. McKinnon, a lead climate scientist at Scripps Institute. And they have a little video on here. We are in the midst of a long-term decline in Arctic sea ice, which may have described as a death spiral. Arctic sea ice is thinning rapidly. Thinning is important, not just extent, okay? Volume counts. The Arctic will eventually be ice-free in the summer. When exactly this will happen is an ongoing matter of scientific investigation and inquiry. In other words, no one knows for certain. We can only make estimates about this based on climate models. What are the consequences? Now, this is significant, okay? This is what many times, people don't convey in their articles. The average person who doesn't study any of this says, okay, so there's not going to be ice in the Arctic, big deal. It'll be warmer. Yeah. The main consequence of an ice-free Arctic is the dark blue open ocean is much less reflective than sea ice, which leads to significantly more radiation being absorbed. Additionally, there is the latent heat effect. In short, an ice-free Arctic means the beginning of the end of cooling. because huge amounts of sunlight won't get reflected back into space anymore, resulting in much more warming. With less Arctic ice, the planet's ability to cool itself becomes more and more uncertain. The Arctic is a natural freezer, says Michael Mann, a climatologist and director of the Earth Systems Science Center at Pennsylvania State University, in an email to The Verge. Just like you'd be concerned if all of the ice in your freezer melted, so you should be concerned about the loss of Arctic sea ice. During this period of increased and continued ice loss, researchers are saying that our climate and weather patterns will be profoundly disrupted and unstable. According to the latest IPCC report, the coming consequences of the melting poles are nothing short of scary. There's a video, it says, and include increasing in extreme weather and storms, flooding, famine, in parentheses, with enormous risk to global food supply, refugees, disease, drought, wildfire, and much more, not the least of which is conflict and geopolitical upheaval. Eminent and world-renowned researcher James Lovelock has been saying for over a decade that more than 6 billion people could perish by the end of the century due to the multiple cascading impacts of dangerous climate change. Positive feedback. Let me read that again. James Lovelock has been saying for over a decade that more than 6 billion people could perish by the end of the century due to multiple cascading impacts of dangerous climate change. And if that many people die, who's going to be taking care of the 450 plus nuclear power plants? Positive feedback loops, not a good thing. There are also, of course, obvious feedbacks on various animals who live and depend on the sea ice ecosystem, which will have to adapt to other ecosystems or perish. There are numerous other feedbacks, positive feedbacks, like Hansen's et al.'s ice climate report shows. And don't forget that in this case, these so-called positive feedbacks are not a good thing. Just because the word positive is in there doesn't mean it's good. And let me go back. It says various animals whose lives depend on the sea ice will have to adapt to other ecosystems. The key phrase there is will have to adapt. Well, generally speaking, in all the times that the climate's changed in the very distant past, it's been slow enough where, yes, some species went extinct, but others, it was slow enough where others were able to slowly evolve and evolution took care of their adaptation. But this heating that we're experiencing is extremely fast. This is abrupt climate change. Everything's changing too fast. Animals and plants, including us, we cannot adapt that fast. And for us, the adaptation isn't necessarily completely physical. It's within our civilizations and our economic systems. We're not able to adapt fast enough so that there's not breakdown. And back when they talked about geopolitical conflict, etc., does that sound anything like what's actually starting to happen? Okay, so additionally, I goofed. Additionally, NASA is saying that ice loss on the Arctic will even affect the Earth's obliquity. Impacts on El Nino and La Nina phases are also expected, along with wavier jet streams, and a regularly disrupted polar vortex. Bubbling methane release from thermal karsts or thaw lakes is also accelerating permafrost melt. One study published in Nature Geoscience in 2012 estimated that thawed permafrost could contribute up to 1.7 degrees Celsius of warming. An ice-free Arctic has the potential to disrupt atmospheric and ocean currents around the world. Let's not even talk about the implications of the theoretical 50 gigaton methane burst known as the methane time bomb, or the Clathrate gun hypothesis, in other words, or the methane glaciers at Novaya Zemlya, which are known to be leaking radiation from the Tsar Bomba detonation into the already badly polluted oceans. Of course, this has been mostly debunked. Since we haven't experienced an ice-free Arctic as modern humans yet, it's hard to say exactly what the effects would really look like. Would an event like this signify the point of no return for people? Would images of such an event come to illustrate that what climate change really means for us? Only time will tell. But an ice-free Arctic would certainly be a frightening sign of things to come. Some scientists say that when the Arctic goes, we will be headed for a hothouse Earth, as the planet gradually loses the ability to cool itself, but this won't happen suddenly, as some have claimed either. Okay. While losing the summer sea ice will drive significant regional warming and may increase mid-latitude weather extremes as well as disorient the jet stream, the global warming boost, according to Dr. David McKay, will be modest, estimated at 0.15 to 0.2 degrees Celsius, of which around half has already happened. Okay. The consequences of an ice-free Arctic, according to James Hansen. The following list includes the consequences of an ice-free Arctic as defined by eminent climate scientist James Hansen. Both wave action of Ekman pump action will increase the bottom water temperatures in the East Siberian Arctic shelf, which will increase methane emissions from hydrate decomposition. That's a really bad one. That's the one where they're melting the clathrates, and that has to do with the 50 gigaton methane bomb. Okay? Permafrost decomposition will accelerate, which will increase both CO2 and CH4 emissions. CH4 is methane. Boreal forest wildfires will increase, like in Fort McMurray, only further north and worse. Look that up, the fire at Fort McMurray. It happened just a few years ago. I don't know, what was it, like 7 or 8 years ago? I don't know. The atmospheric thermal gradient will decrease, which will decrease the constraints on the jet stream, which will increase blocking events, which will increase extreme weather events. Warming over Greenland will accelerate, which will increase ice mass loss and associated sea level rise, CLR. The specific humidity in the Arctic will increase, and as water vapor is a greenhouse gas, this will increase Arctic amplification, which will decrease snow cover that will act as a positive feedback for more warming due to decreasing albedo. That whole positive feedback thing is a big deal. Any little tiny bit of warming creates an issue. But what that does is it releases more feedbacks, more tipping points that bring on more warming. So I don't know how they could ever say, once all of this gets going, it's just a chain reaction. Warming feeds warming, feeds warming, feeds warming. It's a never stop thing. Yes, there's some negative feedbacks, which, could put the brakes on some things. But every single study I've ever read, the negative feedbacks are extremely minimal, almost non-existent. Okay, let's see. Shrub growth in the tundra will increase shrubs, okay, which will also act as a positive feedback for more warming by decreasing albedo in the tundra. In other words, everything will get darker. You see soil, you see dark green. You're not going to see white snow. Pests will more further move okay, let me try this again. Pest, P-E-S-T-S, will more move further north, which will attack boreal forest and tundra shrub growth. We've already seen this. Ground burrowing animals like ground squirrels will move north, which will accelerate permafrost degradation. Farmland will move northward, which will decrease albedo and will accelerate permafrost degradation. And don't think these massive mega farms, this industrial farming, will move north and everybody will still get fed, because you're still going to have the most important aspect of this, which is an unpredictable seasonal growing season. You're not going to get a consistent growing season, especially as things continue and you have to move north. You'll be lucky if you can get a little dinky garden and you go out in it every day and completely live in it to take care of it, to get it to grow. That's what's going to happen. Massive monoculture agriculture is not going to exist. They're not going to be able to do it. Plankton growth will accelerate in the Arctic, which will be smaller in size than the current average, which will sequester less carbon. The thermohaline circulation, or in other words, the Great Oceanic Conveyor, will both slow and will also convey more warmth into the Barents-Kara Sea areas up north where it's going to melt more ice. Shipping will increase, which will increase carbon emissions, including black carbon in the Arctic. Black carbon is important because as the black soot lays on the white snow, you're going to get more absorption of heat from the sun because it creates less albedo. Resource extraction, oil, gas, coal, iron, will increase. They're going to keep doing it. They're not going to stop. Recent research is just linking sea ice retreat with tropical phenomena and changes at the equator, including a new kind of El Nino and drastically a meandering jet stream. This further impacts the influence of Arctic sea ice variability on Pacific trade winds. It also corresponds to sudden atmospheric or stratospheric warming and expanding tropical zones. The mystery of the expanding tropics. As Earth's dry, hot zones shift rapidly polewards, researchers are scrambling to figure out the cause and consequences. It's happening. Did you hear that statement? As Earth's dry, hot zones shift rapidly polewards. Okay, consequences. Hadley cell expansion will impact us all as the world warms. It means extreme temperatures, storms, droughts, and fires. This is also what happens when the center of cold at the poles is not cold enough to hold the warm air cells back. If you sign up for free at edX, you can take Michael Mann's course, Climate Change, the Science and Global Impact. He discusses Hadley cell expansion. This is now impacting Australia. There's a video. The global classroom is 24/7, learn something new every day. Changing ocean currents. Arctic's ice melt is also changing ocean currents. While melt slows the AMOC, it can speed up local currents. Up until now, scientists have been unsure of how the climate crisis will impact ocean currents. Some models suggested a warmer world would lead to a slower ocean. The scientist explained, this is certainly the case for the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation. Meridional, that's how I say it. It trips up a lot of people. The AMOC in the North Atlantic. But because this current is driven by cold water sinking and flowing southward, its slowing doesn't negate the possibility that winds could increase other currents. What about Greenland? Greenland is also melting, and there's a video, more than expected in the summer months. Greenland's main glacier, the largest ice sheet outside of Antarctica, lost a staggering 217 billion tons of ice in 1 month in July of 2019, releasing enough water to fill 4.4 million Olympic-sized swimming pools. Greenland's ice loss will contribute significantly to sea level rise. It is now becoming widely known that Greenland's ice is melting much faster than thought. Here's why that is scary. Greenland's losses are on average of 270 billion tons of ice a year. There you go. That's a year. Okay, that's the average. So that's not like some one-time thing. As far as other conditions go, the winter high temperature was about 45 degrees above normal in the last couple of years. The North Pole reached temperatures above freezing despite being in total darkness during the coldest months of the year. In addition, some areas of Greenland experienced open water for the very first time, and the Bering Strait was also completely ice-free for part of the winter. Research shows that Greenland's ice is not just trickling into the ocean, but actually melting significantly in large spikes beyond 15% battery. Okie doke. Beyond rising seas, this will increase freshwater running into the ocean, which can slow down the Atlantic conveyor, a massive pattern of currents in the Atlantic Ocean. There are numerous terrifying implications here that should make us strongly consider stopping business as usual, BAU, immediately when it comes to burning fossil fuels and polluting our planet for profit. That's the key, for profit. When people used to say money is the root of all evil, I didn't get it when I was younger. But, people they want to say that, hunter-gatherers or the people that lived beyond 10,000 years ago, didn't, that they weren't any innocents, that they did things too. Well, you know what? They didn't have a profit system. So whatever bits they did to harm, it wasn't on the scale, and there was nothing to perpetuate. Okay, so they ran whole herds and off a cliff. Okay, fine, but the profit system and fossil fuels put everything on steroids. Whatever we were doing before that was bad enough. But when you have fossil fuels and you have the profit motive, forget about it. That was the end, period. You could almost bet. I mean, you could have bet. You could have bet and won that we were going to go extinct based on that. Okay, let me read that again. There are numerous terrifying implications here that should make us strongly consider stopping business as usual, BAU, immediately when it comes to burning fossil fuels and polluting our planet for profit. Flatten Greenland and the Atlantic jet stream goes with it. Arctic versus Antarctic melting trends. The ice-free Arctic that we have been discussing here is a phenomenon that is particular to the Arctic region. However, we cannot forget that Antarctic is also hemorrhaging ice. Of course, Antarctic will not leave an open blue ocean because it has a large landmass underneath it. However, it will have enormous and frightening consequences, and it loses ice, which is happening right now. If we lose ice on this continent, it is well known that its loss will contribute to massive sea level rise as well as sudden stratospheric warming. There's a video. That kind of melting will have effect down the road. Yes, a few good years. But that clinches. I mean, remember the movie Waterworld? That's what you're talking about. Okay. NOAA has reported January 2020 as the warmest on record, calling it incredible and abnormal. And of course, now it's 2022. Now we see what else has happened. On February 8th, 2020, Antarctica recorded its hottest temperature on record, 64.9 degrees Fahrenheit, or 18.3 degrees Celsius. Dramatic images show an iceless region of Antarctica following the report of record temperatures. The recent highs in the region have followed a string of heat waves since January, Marcelo Lape, director of the Chilean Antarctic Institute, told Reuters. This is due to human-caused climate change. The amount of ice lost annually from the Antarctic has increased sixfold from 1979 to 2017. The World Meteorological Organization, the United Nations authoritative voice on weather, climate, and water, said in a statement last week. This is the foreshadowing of what is to come, a researcher said. It's exactly in line of what we've been seeing for decades. The Doomsday Glacier. Glaciologists have described Thwaites Glacier in Antarctica as the most important glacier in the world. The riskiest glacier, even the Doomsday Glacier. In this BBC video, this glacier is discussed. A team of 40 or so scientists are part of the International Thwaites Glacier Collaboration, a 5-year, $50 million joint UK-US effort to understand why it is changing so rapidly. The project represents the biggest and most complex scientific field program in Antarctic history. The BBC's chief environment correspondent, Justin Rowlett, went to meet the scientists behind the project. Massive holes in the sea ice are opening in Antarctica. Pine and Thwaites, which is known as the Doomsday Glacier, are the ones to watch. Ice is thinning in these areas. If you zoom in on NASA Worldview, you can find holes. Bellinghausen sea ice is mainly gone. Scientists warn that the Doomsday Glacier may collapse in less than 5 years, adding 10 feet of sea level rise. It's a strange thing. In the dead of sub-zero Antarctic winter, when the oceans at the bottom of the world are frozen over, that scientists have begun to observe these massive holes the size of South Carolina or larger opening up in the sea ice since 2016 and earlier. Now scientists have a good grasp of why such great holes known as polinyas, Russian for hole in the ice, form. The water under the glaciers is too hot due to anthropogenic climate change. Now, when they say hot, they don't mean 80 degrees. They mean above freezing. That's all it takes. Got it? The glaciers are being melted from above and below. New science shows how the ocean under the ice gets mixed up, like the bartender shaking up a cocktail when it's too hot. That dooms great swaths of ice, and there's growing evidence that these striking bouts of warming are happening more often. Worse still, this is not a gradual event. The gaping holes form rapidly without notice. Suddenly, a hole appears in the floating ice. This is what abrupt change looks like. Also, large piece was reported to have broken off of Pine Island Glacier in 2016, Larsen C in parentheses, and another in early 2001, and again in 2021. Maybe that was 2020. Yeah, it says 201, but I think it's supposed to be 2001. According to NASA, the region surrounding the Thwaites and Pine Island glaciers contain enough highly vulnerable ice to raise global sea levels by about 4 feet. Think about it. All right, we just had Ian hitting Florida. So we've had what? A few inches of sea level rise? If we get 4 feet, what do you think? I mean, come on. It's like ridiculous already. Large calving events used to take place at Pine Island Glacier every 4 to 6 years, but they're now a nearly annual occurrence. Scientists are now reporting that the poles are melting 6 times faster than in the 90s. In the following video, Dave Borlass of Just Have a Think discusses this further. Okay, there's the video. Researchers can use NASA Worldview to monitor this situation. NSIDC provides a lot of information and analysis on the differences between Arctic versus Antarctic ice loss. The mysterious blood falls may also shed light on how Antarctica has responded to climate change. Research in the past decade has shown that the Amundsen Sea embayment of West Antarctica might have passed a tipping point. The grounding line where ice and ocean and bedrock meet is retreating irreversibly. A model study shows that when this sector collapses, it could destabilize the rest of West Antarctica, an ice sheet like toppling dominoes, leading to about 3 meters of sea level rise on a timescale of centuries to millennia. So yeah, it would take a while, but it was once thought that the Antarctic ice sheet was practically immutable, but paleohistory disproves this and shows complete ice loss on the continent has happened before and it can happen again. Paleo evidence shows that such widespread collapse of the West Antarctic ice sheet has occurred repeatedly in the past. Antarctic ice loss is nothing new, but as lead scientist author Eric Rignot of University of California, Irvine, tells the Post, East Antarctica's contributions to this phenomena warrant further study. The traditional view from many decades ago is that nothing much is happening in East Antarctica, Rignot says. It's a little bit like wishful thinking. Doomsday Glacier melting at an alarming rate, say scientists. David Holland, NYU scientist, said the ocean underneath the glacier is too warm. 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit above freezing. The oceans have already absorbed too much heat. This will not be easily corrected or reversed now. The Thwaites Glacier, or Doomsday Glacier, will result in a 10-foot sea level rise when it melts, which is now underway. Geopolitical vulnerabilities and risk factors of the ice-free Arctic. There are global stakeholders like China, Russia, and the United States all waiting anxiously to exploit the opportunities of an ice-free Arctic. Authors like Wynne Dwyer, who wrote the book Climate Wars, have been saying for over a decade that the changes in this area would bring conflict. This will impact geopolitics, requiring new rules for protecting the Arctic from exploitation, shipping, military exercises, and fossil fuel extraction. The job of the Arctic Council will become more important than ever. At the same time, public discussion can no longer be avoided. The World Economic Forum states that, despite its importance, the Arctic Ocean sometimes goes missing from public discussion. In the following video, Dave Borlass of Just Have a Think discusses the potential vulnerabilities and risks that come with an ice-free Arctic. We're already seeing it. They're already up there trying to plant their flags. They're all vying for their piece of the Arctic. Russia, China, the United States. China is 900 miles from the shore. I mean, it doesn't have a shore. It doesn't. But it's saying they have a claim. What can we do? Oh, wait a minute. Did I skip this? Sorry. Climate refugees. According to this article, we can also expect to see sea level rise, albedo impacts, more extreme weather, and thawing permafrost, just to name a few more. There are also feedbacks on various peoples whose livelihoods depend on the sea ice ecosystem, which will have to adapt to other ecosystems or perish. Inuit populations have already begun to deal with relocation. This is only the beginning of the impacts on people's lives all over the globe from the consequences of melting ice. It is clear that the great climate migration has already begun. What can we do? The changes that are happening in the Arctic don't just affect the Arctic. Our planet is an interconnected system, and the vanishing ice is already having ripple effects around the globe. Our planet is warming, and its cryosphere, the Earth's frozen layer, is melting, and the looming consequences are nothing short of scary. Sharp and potentially devastating temperature rises of 3 degrees Celsius to 5 degrees in the Arctic are now inevitable even if the world succeeds in cutting greenhouse gases emissions in line with the Paris Agreement, research has found. While there is still ice on the poles, some scientists have theorized that the Earth might be able to regenerate and come back from some of the devastation humans have caused. Humans should do all they can do now to save this incredible natural environment. It is unlike any other place on Earth, the Arctic. Stopping climate change in the Arctic will require an enormous reduction in the emissions of fossil fuels, and the world has made scant progress despite obvious urgency. Moreover, many greenhouse gases persist in our atmosphere for years. That's an understatement. It's like thousands of years. Even if we were to cease all emissions tomorrow, it would take decade upon decade for those gases to dissolve, for temperatures to stabilize, though some recent research suggests the span could be shorter. I don't know. There's only one scientist who says that. That's it. If things keep going this way, we will be left with no other option except to try risky gambles with new technologies and geoengineering. Several researchers are now suggesting a non-toxic geoengineering technique called marine cloud brightening, which that is not as bad as the solar radiation management. Marine cloud brightening, you can almost get behind that, as one way to save the Arctic should things keep getting worse as they are. But I don't think it's as potent, but it's highly experimental. In fact, it's never been done on a large scale. That's the key. And not much outside the laboratory either. But it may be our only chance. Some are also asking if there will be possible to refreeze the Arctic. There's a video. What about artificial glaciers? There's a video. Scientists and engineers are now researching ways of refreezing the Arctic, even though geoengineering is still a taboo topic. Okay? All those people talking about chemtrails. No, that was the oil companies, trying to sway people away from the concept of climate change, that it was happening. This was like, 20 years ago, even I think they came up with chemtrails. That's not real. They were saying they were already spraying stuff to kill us. Like, wouldn't it kill everybody? I mean, like, really, why would they do that? Because it's going to kill everybody. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense, people. You got to pay attention to real scientists. Okay, where was I? Okay. We need to begin development and testing procedures now and come up with governance structures while we still have time. This is a complex problem. It would be a much better idea to save the Arctic. Do you really think the world's going to come together on this? I am not like other astrologers, people. I am not throwing out little hopium balloons, okay? Climate mobilization. According to climatemobilization.org, a climate mobilization effort means not only preventing unimaginable suffering from climate and environmental catastrophe, but also working to reinvent our economy, key to address the social inequities on which the extractive economy has been based. Just like with the coronavirus pandemic, people could participate in degrowth strategies, eat less meat, consume less, shop less, drive less, fly less, and work less. Live simply and reduce their carbon footprint at the same time by just taking some very easy steps toward change. If we can all learn to wear face masks and social distance, we can also learn to take steps to reduce our carbon footprint more and more every day. How did that really go? Really? You really going to get people to do this? This was what I was big on for a long time, but by now, the degrowth, it'll never happen. You have to get every single person on board pretty much around the world. Okay, most leaders and the people at the top of all governments to do degrowth, not going to happen. And even the people underneath would revolt. I mean, they just don't get it. And you know who would revolt the most? Americans. Oh my God. I can't go to my professional sports stadium, game, whatever, and buy my beer and, sit there with my stupid hat on and jump up and down. Okay, I'm sorry, but that is the case. You're going to have people revolting. They'll never go for degrowth. And that's really what we need. That's one of the main things we need, but they're not going to do it. Become a citizen scientist. People everywhere can work together to solve these mysteries and gather clues to enhance this science. Scientists warning advocates for citizen science. According to National Geographic, citizen science is the practice of public participation and collaboration in scientific research to increase scientific knowledge. Programs like SciStarter provide opportunities for people everywhere to get involved. Use NASA's Global Ice Route Viewer tool to become a sentinel of climate change in the Arctic and beyond. Researching the cryosphere is fascinating. Many publicly available diagnostic research and educational tools are discussed and linked to from this and other scientists' warning knowledge base. Wow. Okay, now there's just all the resources that they gathered everything from. And I do believe I put the link on for this article. but I could do it again. Okay, so now that we heard all the science, now we look at the human behavioral response to our current situation. And what is that? War, 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 and war. I mean, it's just beginning. They are so excited about the fact that the Arctic is melting, let alone the Antarctic. I mean, eventually, I bet they'll even go there and try to see what kind of resources they can find at the Antarctic because there's a whole continent underneath the ice. The top doesn't care if the bottom dies. The problem is, just like always, they don't understand what the consequences are of that. Who's going to take care of the nuclear power plants? You see, you have to be aware of, I don't like to come up with these conspiracy things because most of the time, some of the people who are handling things at the top don't really think of themselves as carrying out these diabolical plans, or at least that's how they would end up. They don't think of it that way. Some of them do, some of them don't. So, as much of what we just read occurs, there's going to be a breakdown. All massive civilizations collapse. And we know this is going to happen. I mean, in many different arenas, they talk about it. Of course, there's work happening to negate that. But in the long run, there are many of those at the top who don't care if many of us at the bottom die. Now, astrologically speaking, okay, I've covered a lot on Pluto going through Capricorn, and I covered some of Pluto entering Aquarius. But I did a video on Neptune and Pisces, and then on the United States progress chart, but I haven't put it up yet because I made a mistake in it. And I'd rather not. It was such a cool video because my little kitty got it starred in it. She jumped on my lap and she tried to get her to 15 minutes of fame. I will make a video on this, but we have to consider the fact that I'm going to put a little piece here. In the United States progress chart, Virgo is rising. The progress sun is in Pisces. And right now, the progress sun for the United States is in exact opposition to the progress rising sign. And now with Neptune going through Pisces, and that's been opposing or will be opposing, it already has, but it's retrograded and it's going to go back. Neptune is opposing itself at 25 degrees Virgo. Okay, so there is, and those are the third and ninth houses, which is intercepted in the United States chart. I guess this is the video on this because I'm remembering it all. If you look up the United States progress chart for now, and you will see that at the Sibley chart for the United States, Pisces and Virgo are intercepted. And I'm very key on this because I have the same outer wheel. United States is 12 degrees Sagittarius rising, and I'm 13, and we both have the Virgo Pisces interception. So I'm a little bit aware of how that works. So all this issue of false news, fake news, how we need to be able to incorporate more critical thinking in gathering our information to make informed decisions on who we vote for, what we vote for. Understanding other cultures, the ninth house, understanding uh, a broader view and not a narrow view of the earth, especially for people with Pluto and Virgo. That's my generation. Uh, so we are in a situation in which if people aren't doing the work to read and learn about our issues, we're going to be propagandized to death. That's what's happening, okay? With that Neptune through Pisces, and then the progressed sun in Pisces, and it's squaring at 13 degrees right now. It's been squaring the natal ascendant of the United States. It's, I can't express more. It's I can't express more clearly how in a fog we are, how delusional we've been. I mean, if that doesn't say what you need to do, I don't know what would. It says, please open up your minds, use some critical thinking, be aware that you're being lied to by the leaders, by them, first of all, never having explained thoroughly to the public just how bad climate change really is. They're always coming up, oh, but we can fix it. We can fix it. Well, that's what they say now. We should have been doing something 50 years ago, 50, 60 years ago. You don't wait until you're getting the consequences to start doing something. Because, like I said, there is a chain reaction. There are feedback loops. Now it's so difficult to stop the train wreck. If we'd done something decades ago, like teach people just the reality, but we were lied to by oil companies and by coal companies and the Koch brothers. Look them up. Look up the Koch brothers. They were part of the John Birch Society. Look up all of this and start reading. I mean, there is just always the positive and the negative expression of any sign, any planet, in any sign, in any aspect. You have to remember that. There's both things happening at the same time. It's almost like a quantum theory kind of thing, if you ask me. I mean, you've got the positive trying to be done, but at the same time, the negative is being done. So it's a constant conflict. And is that really what being alive is just dealing with figuring out the balance to what is real and good and what isn't, what is negative. It's a constant back and forth. And the United States chart is very symbolic of that, with that third house, ninth house, Neptune and Pisces thing going on. And now with the progressed rising sign being Virgo and the progressed ascendant being Pisces and then the progressed sun being in Pisces, it's so evident that that is what we're dealing with. It's like we're lost in who we were, Sagittarius, rising. Oh, we're about independence and individual freedom, right? Sagittarius. But yet now we have a progressed sun in Pisces, and we want our, the sun, we want our leaders to save us. Wait a minute, what about ourselves? What about learning? Third house, what about learning and taking in data and information and learning and then putting that to work, Virgo, in the ninth house and coming up with the real scientific concepts from that? If you don't pick up on this, I mean, it is late. It's too late. But the best thing you can do, third house. Okay, third house. What is the third house? It is your neighborhood. It is your extended family. So, how hard is it? Thanksgiving is coming up. Like talking to people about reality. That's not really easy to do. right? But there's kind of this, I've covered it in another video back a ways, social collateral. So even, especially in your neighborhood, like the people around you, because we're all going to need each other as time goes on. Right now, you can see that we're having trouble enough with energy, availability, and affordability. So as time goes on and that becomes more serious, and we shouldn't be using it anyway, but what are you going to do? There's 8 billion of us. So social collateral means you develop some kind of positive enough relationship with your neighbors and or relatives so that you can help each other. We're going to need each other if we're going to survive. And how long do you want to survive? It may be a good long ways down the road before you have to make any kind of decision about how, because life is so horrible, you don't want to be surviving. But that might come sooner. I don't know. When I read the book The Road, and then I saw the movie. I guess I can't say too much about this because I don't want to be a spoiler. But there's a part in there where I don't understand. But you really should read that book or watch the movie or both. And that will give you an idea. But The Road, McCormick is the author, the last name. I forget the first name. But anyway, I think this is good for now. If I were you, I would put in for the progressed chart of the United States and look at that interception of Pisces Virgo. I mean, so that means 13 years ago, the sun went into Pisces, and that was just a tad before Neptune went into Pisces. What does Pisces rule? It rules the oceans, for one thing. Neptune, the oceans. What's happening? One of the major things we're dealing with is sea level rise. And it's like we're supposed to be, at this point, I guess, gathering information, third house, on that fact. And we are, the scientists are. I don't know about the average person. They're hearing about it, but they don't pay much attention. Except now, maybe because of Ian, they are. But now with Neptune, it's not going to be there much longer. I think it's 2026. It goes into Aries. That's the United States' fourth house of domestic issues that can express in a lot of different ways. And I think I will have to cover that down the road. But always try, when you're doing your readings for people, to incorporate the fact that they live within within a system, within a system, within a system. All this talk about, your overall attitude, keeping the light and the love, it's kind of what I'm talking about when I'm talking about developing good relationships with your neighbors, social collateral. But I like to use terms and examples of real situations. I can't go around saying, oh, there's going to be light and love. People don't know what that means. You don't know what that means. You can't always go around in a good mood and this big old fat smile on your face and when the world's falling down around you. But you can, every day I go for walks in my neighborhood. It's quite rural, but people meet me, they see me, they talk to me off and on. People know me for the past almost, 20 years. It's going on 20 years in a couple of years. And so, and some of them know that I'm into understanding climate. I don't go around talking about it too much, but a few of them really know basically where I come from. And when the time comes when more issues are going to be hitting people in their daily lives, you will be the person that they will say, oh, well, they gave me a heads up. They had an understanding of this coming up and tried to show me that I need to be prepared in my daily life, mentally and physically, to handle this. And that will give you a little bit of leeway, uh, leadership ability, even. If you know some things and about how to help people, how to lift people up, how to organize community events or community help situations, this will be what you need to do. Because if you're going to be an astrologer in this day and age, you need to be able to work on a very global, broad level in order to have any credibility. If you're not going to be able to explain to people what's going on out there, they're not. How are you going to have any credibility? You're telling somebody about how wonderful this is going to be or how their love life is going to be, but you're not incorporating anything else about what's going on in the real world and how that could affect them on a very deep level personally. Uh, that you're not hitting the mark. So I would read up as much as you can. I want to get Andrew Blixen's Event Horizon. Um, that's another climate book. He's an actual, I think he's a paleoclimatologist. I think that's what or an astrophysicist, one of them. And look that book up. Um, so The Event Horizon by Andrew Blixen. Okay. There's other books out there. Going Dark by Guy McPherson. He's an evolutionary biologist. Um, uh, and then there's others. So if you start looking around in the doomosphere, so to speak, on climate change and planetary overshoot, that's the overall umbrella. Climate change is a subset of planetary overshoot. You begin researching some of these scientific terms, and you will be able to follow through with other steps to take to study. So I'm over and out now. So I've been talking a lot. Sorry, my voice is a little hoarse, but it's been a long day, and I did take a beautiful walk today, and I took some beautiful scenic pictures of some of the colors in the trees. It's about that time of year. They're really beginning to change a lot now. And it was a real meditative walk for me. I needed it desperately. I had some situations that developed this morning and at my job, and that helped. It helped a lot. I was out walking for almost 2 hours. There's nothing like nature, especially with somebody with a lot of Sagittarius. I'm telling you, as much as you can possibly be out and breathe the air outdoors in some kind of green space, even if you're in a city, try to find a green space if you can, even if it's just a bench by a tree, and you can hear the birds or something. That is really, really healing, I swear. All right, over and out. Bye.